Satan's Fall. Made by Father Death 666. Found in www.creepypasta.org web link. The Devil on the Fiery Porch. He was back again that year, the same as he had been for 5 years running, keeping the majority of trick-or-treaters behind an imaginary line of uneasiness drawn at the edge of the curb with his hell-red grin and burning cauldrons. It was a scene from Faust, only this was no play, this was my neighborhood. It wasn't just kids who lingered apprehensively in the street, but parents as well. In a place where the definition of Halloween was more like cardboard skeletons and plastic jack-o'-lanterns, a guy with a penchant for fire and pitchforks could be extraordinarily scary. Really young children were hurried past the residence altogether via lawns on the opposite side of the street, hopefully distracted by candy long enough to save them from the psyche-scarring nightmares certain to result from even the smallest glimpse of him. This left only the few, the brave, to make the journey and collect one of the candy bars given out by the devil basking in the red glow of the doorway. Trick-or-treating in the 1970s wasn't the flirt with death that it can be today. At that time, in most suburban settings, people lived in the same house for years and made the effort to get to know their neighbors and their neighbors' children. It was a safe haven from the malicious world beyond, a stronghold of sterile thoughts and selective ideals. That is why it was more alarming when the occasional anti-Cleaver oddballs, like the Warren family, managed to infiltrate the peaceful utopia and upset the balance of neatly trimmed lawns and Tupperware parties. Especially when at Halloween their oldest son Wayne Warren painted himself red, donned horns, and sat on a throne between two flaming cauldrons on their sunken porch. My first encounter with him was when my father volunteered to secure one of Satan's fat candy bars on my behalf. I watched wide-eyed at the curb while my mother yacked up the other neighborhood mothers about the sick nature of the affair. Later that night, as I spread my bounty out upon the living room floor, she snatched the king-size Snickers that the devil had given and tossed it into the trash. Only later did I understand the action, although to my knowledge no one had ever reported any ill effects from his confectionery treats. The grease-paint devil quickly became a milestone of bravery for the youth of our neighborhood. As we got older, our worth was measured upon whether we had trick-or-treated his house on our own. For most of the neighborhood kids, it was a confrontation with their own childhood fears, a rite of passage. But my own eventual encounter with him reckoned with more than mere cultural Demon's Peak. For me it was not a conquest, but a beginning, a passageway to a haunted life well beyond the October ritual. And after what it indirectly wrought upon my life and the life of my childhood friend, Dan Rutgers, I came to realize that I had more in common with Wayne Warren than anyone would ever know. I was old enough to trick-or-treat on my own. I had been for a few years, having entered the 7th grade, but had thus far chosen to skip the devil's house despite my Samhain freedom. And as the candy collector stood entwined in trepidation at the end of his lane at night, I looked on, ready to cast away silly childhood fears. In the recessed front porch of the sandstone house, the devil sat on a black throne, pitchfork in hand and grinning like a madman. On either side of him a cauldron belched hot flames, which illuminated the entire alcove with a yellow-red glow that brought a little piece of hell right there to our suburban street. Dark music, probably borrowed from the Omen soundtrack, boomed from somewhere on the porch like a theme for a black mass, while sounds of the haunted house crept out of the home's dark windows. They were open just enough to let in some of the autumn air, which was uncharacteristically cool for Texas even in late October. Every once in a while, the devil would bark out something to the effect of "Come on up kids," or just let out a string of vein-chilling laughs that echoed off of the houses and faded into the night air like a horde of goblins. As a fan of the horror film classics, somewhere inside I had begun to admire his mastery of Halloween, but the fear of something I did not fully understand still outweighed this association. The man behind the red face was something real, and that's what made him scary to me, even if some people simply wrote him off as a self-aggrandizing jerk. "Are we going up there?" Dan asked me as I stood at the curb siphoning the last bits of courage from my body. Dan was a few years older and several inches taller, but we were two boys made from the same mold. We had been best friends for 6 years now, both possessing a fever for Hot Wheels, big gyms, and superheroes. I could see his own reservation just under the green skins of his incredible Hulk face. His mother was an inferno-preaching Baptist, and though I could not understand at the time, he grappled with issues far deeper than my own regarding the fiendish display. "Yeah," I answered, although I had yet to top off my courage tank. Our mutual friend, Bob, spoke from behind his Planet of the Apes mask. "Y'all can go if you want, but I ain't. My brother says that guy's a goon and he don't wanna have to kick his butt when he finds a razor blade in my candy bar." "I ain't gonna eat the candy," I replied, stating what I thought was obvious. The music boomed forth with a new strain and I looked hard at the real fire, the past prime teenager in the red makeup, and the iron gates which stood open at the porch's arc. "Well, he ain't gonna kill us or anything. He's been doing this ever since I can remember, and lots of kids have gone up there." I nudged my head toward two older kids who had just been up to Satan. "They just went. And if they did, then I'm going. Dan, you coming?" Getting a yes from Dan, I put my foot onto the devil's brown lawn and began the approach. I tried to imagine what I saw across the street the other 364 days out of the year. A stony-looking house with a dark porch and some skinny druggy guy coming and going in his beat-up Camaro. Sometimes kissing or beating his girlfriend a little, but always giving me a chin-up nod as if to say I was cool. It was just Wayne Warren. Not the devil. Telling myself this made it a little better, but on Halloween this guy was just plain different. Just plain scary. And as I neared I tried the customary cool nod, but Wayne didn't nod back. Instead he grinned like a mental patient and let out a laugh that resonated in the sunken porch as if it sunk all the way down to hell. Dan, in an attempt at proper All Hallows etiquette, moved up beside me, held out his bag, and muttered trick or treat, which sounded ridiculous under the circumstances. "Hey, hey, hey," Wayne cackled and threw a chunky bar into his bag. Then he focused on me and my spirit-gummed wolfman face. "Something special for you, my friend," he said, reaching down beside his seat. He pulled out something, gazed at it a moment and then threw it into the sack I held open in front of me as if it were my empty soul waiting for him to fill. I didn't get a good look at it, but I didn't care. I'd have a better look as soon as Dan and I got out of the yard. Without any more explanation, Wayne stoked one of the cauldron fires, spit, and turned his attention to a group of approaching teenagers. Dan and I hurried back to the curb where Bob waited. "Let's go next door and check out whatever it was he gave me," I said. Squatting down under a street lamp, Dan and I pulled out our devil's booty. "Just a regular candy bar, but maybe there's a razor blade in it?" he said, ripping into the package and breaking the chunky into several pieces, finding nothing but chocolate inside. Bob removed his Cornelius mask. "What did you get?" I pulled out the weird item Wayne had thrown into my bag and held it up in the bath of white street light. "It looks like a tooth or maybe a horn," I said, not having seen anything like it before. The thing was about 3 inches in length, jagged at one end and tapering into a curved point at the other. But instead of bone or enamel, it was made from a semi-transparent material with what looked like microscopic electronic components inside. "Let me check it out," Dan said, grabbing it from me. "That stuff in there looks like this computer board that my dad showed me." I took it back and looked again beyond its translucent surface. "Computers are a lot bigger than this," I said authoritatively. Bob squinted at it. "That's weird. I bet my brother knows what it is." "Maybe we should ask him?" I suggested. Bob's brother Ronnie rolled the horn thing between his fingers as he looked at it under the desk lamp. "Looks like it came from the robot or something. Y'all are a bunch of goons." He tossed it back at me. "Maybe it come from that alien that crashed over in Motor Valley," he added, making a spooky woo-oo-oo sound. "Huh?" all three of us replied. Ronnie laughed. "I guess y'all were still in diapers. A few years ago, the cops and everybody went out there when something crashed in the woods between Motor Valley Road and Screaming Bridge. Supposedly, they found a blown-up flying saucer, but never found any aliens. When that idiot Wayne Warren was still going to school, I heard a rumor about how he and a friend of his were out there drinking one night and found some flying saucer parts. I think that was about the time he started dressing up like Satan on Halloween. Maybe he's given out those UFO parts instead of candy. Cheap ass. I think it's all bullshit. With that, Ronnie left Bob's room. We all looked again at the thing. Pretty cool story, man. We ought to go out there and check it out. Maybe this did come from a spaceship, I suggested. Dan nodded. I ain't never seen anything like it. Y'all are crazy, Bob said, looking suspiciously at us both. Anything good was usually off limits. It's the trade-off for having parents that give a shit about you. I wasn't allowed in the creek, not allowed to attend spin-a-bottle parties, not allowed in the yard of the kid who talked like a sailor with a belly full of gin, not allowed to ride my bike to Dairy Queen, and basically not allowed to venture beyond the small quadrant of my neighborhood. Motor Valley was definitely off my childhood map. As a result, I spent half my youth in the creek or making bike runs out of the quadrant and the other half making up plausible excuses for why I was late. So a trip to Motor Valley with my usual accomplice, Dan, was nothing too exceptional. But the possibility of dead alien creatures was, and that's why this mission was going to happen regardless of any potential consequences. Bob, however, couldn't go. He was grounded for getting caught with a pack of his dad's cigarettes. Looking back, I can't blame him for finding a way out. Motor Valley got its name from the motocross track that was built on the west end of its expanse. Except for a few ill-repaired roads that cut through it, the valley was mostly brushy Texas woods and low-lying flat land which collected water to create the closest thing to a bog Central Texas could have. If something did crash in there, it was no wonder that collecting all the pieces was difficult. But since the time of the crash, which I later dated at September 30, 1972 by searching old newspapers, much of the water had been irrigated out to subsidize a local cattle feed farm, making it possible to get around in the area without sinking in muck. Dan and I biked down the road past the old junior high school and out across Highway 10 where a few industrial buildings and a bar called the Fire Hose stood like holdouts against the concept of renovation. These were the last few constructs of civilization before Motor Valley took over. As we reached the end of the industrial stretch, we right-turned onto Motor Valley Road, which sloped down a gradual incline until it eventually curved south and cut right through the center of the valley itself. Few cars ever came this way unless they were there to dump something or to take a shortcut to Highway 10, and Dan and I pedaled down the center of the curbless macadam as if we owned it. Off to the side, either in the gullies or along the occasional dirt paths that spidered away from the road, we saw discarded relics of prosperity littering the land like pock marks. Old washing machines, threadbare tires, skeletal couches, and limbless dolls, in their abandoned afterlife, serving as shelters for the dark crawling creatures which hid underneath. We stopped pedaling to coast the hill. "Did you remember the horn thing?" Dan huffed. "Yeah. You're gonna be grounded forever if your mom finds out about this." I nodded dramatically. "What did you tell your mom we were doing?" "Going to Dairy Queen and the arcade." "I hope your mom and my mom don't talk for some reason before we get back. You know how my mom is always calling to find out where I am." I told her I was just going to the arcade. She doesn't want me going over to the Dairy Queen. She heard a story on the news where this guy went into a Dairy Queen in Lubbock and whipped out his pecker and got thrown in jail. Dan laughed. "Sounds like what Jimmy's cousin did at his birthday party." "Didn't some girl kick him in the nads when he did?" "Yeah. He had to stay in bed for 2 weeks." "Excellent." We made the curve and headed onto the long stretch of Motor Valley Road. After more than a half-mile, we made it to the narrow side road which led down to Screaming Bridge. I'm sure that wasn't its original name, but that was the name it went by. One of those tragic lover-suicide stories went along with it. We had heard plenty about it, but had yet to make the trip out. I guess it took potential dead aliens to make it worthwhile. Turning left, we pedaled up the side road whose name was a mystery since it had no street sign. As we crunched along its crumbling blacktop, the trees began to grow thicker, leaning over the road to form a canopy. They cast a shadow across the road like a dark tunnel. Bony branches were beginning to emerge from the clusters of leaves, which were falling away with each cool gust of autumn wind. For a moment I thought of the forest in Oz, but such a pleasant thought quickly faded. I was positive that any beasts lurking in these thorn-written groves would not be singing or dancing. In fact, they were not even chirping or growling. It was oddly silent, which was even more disturbing. As we neared Screaming Bridge, the asphalt turned to sandy loam, making it difficult for our bicycles despite the fact that they were the rugged huffy models with plastic gas tanks screwed to the crossbar to emulate motorcycles. We decided to park them out of sight and go the rest of the way on foot. The bridge was nothing, really. A dirt road that ended in a huge drop filled with sun-faded beer cans and other less identifiable trash. After taking a piss off of its edge, we headed south in the direction Rondi had told us the UFO had supposedly crashed. I checked my pocket for the lock blade knife I had bought with my allowance prior to my last hunting trip with my father. I was no stranger to the country, having been brought along on numerous deer hunts since I was old enough to walk. But in spite of my self-proclaimed exploration expertise and my determination to expose the mystery locked away in Motor Valley, my heart beat hard against my ribs. There was something about the place that seemed deceptive, maybe even evil, which I had not encountered in any of my previous rural expeditions. Crisscrossing the area, we began to look for any signs of whatever signs there might be of a flying saucer crash. But the undergrowth was thick and I soon realized that there would be little hope of finding anything without knowledge of the exact impact location. We wandered on though, scanning for burnt trees or any other peculiar markings. After about 30 minutes, Dan signaled me over to a dense clump of trees where he had spotted something. "Check this out," he said, directing my vision past the branches to a dilapidated shack standing in a clearing 25 yards away. It wasn't a UFO, but at least it was something other than trees and rocks. Dan looked openly disturbed by the possibility of who, or what, might be making it a home. "I wonder if anyone lives there? I don't see any cars," I remarked. "I thought I saw something move by that window," Dan said solemnly. I looked at the filmy window. "I don't know how you could have, look how dirty it is." "Yeah, maybe I was seeing things. I think we better get out of here. Search back over closer to the bridge." "Let's not worry about it," I retorted, trying to look at the situation logically. "If anybody does live there, they'll probably be real old and we could always outrun them." Dan nodded, but I could tell he wasn't wholeheartedly backing me on the decision. "Let's go this." I began as I heard the sound of a stick crack behind us. I spun around. Just feet from us stood a man. He looked old, but his unkempt appearance made an accurate guess at his age impossible. His hair was a brownish gray and poked out from his head like wild grass, framing a dirty unshaven face. A demented smile revealed several missing teeth from the brown rotted mess inside his mouth. He was scratching himself through a convenient hole in his ratty overalls with a handful of long, curling nails as he leered at us. We started to bolt. "Hold on youngins. You boys can't just come poking round out here without talking to old Licky." The man made a scrunching gesture with his face, which looked like the epileptic wink of a madman. We halted our retreat. I fished for something good to say. "My dad's looking for some firewood right back there," I said, pointing in no particular direction. "We were just looking around." "You can't fool old Licky. I knows you're out here by yourselves. If your dad was around you wouldn't look so scared," he said, this time fully protruding his tongue and circling it around his lips in a nervous motion. "Really, sir?" Dan began. But the old man cut him off. "My feelings might get hurt if you keep lying, boy. We're sorry, but we have to get back home soon," I added as if I were quoting from the repertoire of Wally Cleaver. "Not before you come on in and have a drink with Licky. I wanna show you something." He began to walk towards us. Now to this day I can't tell you why we went into that weirdo's shack, but I guess we feared more what would happen if we didn't follow his wishes than what would happen if we did. Maybe I had more faith in my knife than I should have. Regardless, I kept my eyes on the old man as he led us into the leaning gray shanty. "You boys like Coca-Colas?" he asked as we followed him inside. Yeah," I said, knowing full well that Dan was a strict 7-Up drinker, but under the circumstances figuring it wouldn't matter. The first thing that struck us sour about the inside of the shack was the smell. Worse than the smell of Licky himself, it was like the musty smell of an old house exponentially worsened until it reached near organic putrefaction. A snail of nausea slinked across my gut as the first thick waft of stench rolled into my lungs. The cramped single room of the shanty was as rotted on the inside as it was on the outside. The exposed boards of the ceiling were completely gray and covered with cobwebs. An old rickety cot was shoved into one corner, a brownish stain covering its sagging middle. Over at the opposite end was a broken-down stove, resembling a leper with its rust-eaten porcelain finish. A tattered beige couch sat rotting against the long wall, almost hidden by countless piles of old water-stained magazines. They looked mostly like Playboys and Hustlers as far as I could tell. To our right sat a dusty old wooden crate. It looked to me like a coffin used back in the 1800s. A fat rat sniffed around its base. But the most shocking aspect of the shack was the wallpaper. Old pinup-style nudie pictures had been cut from countless magazines and stuck to every visible inch of wall. Superimposed on top of this layer were random pictures of goats and other wild beasts, taken from magazines I was not familiar with. They were all faded by the damp and rotting conditions. I had seen plenty of naked pictures in my grandfather's garage, so I wasn't too shocked. But Dan's religious background didn't seem to be mixing well with the mass of nude women and goats. "You boys wouldn't be looking for a UFO, would you?" Licky asked as he began digging in a dirty box near the stove. I peeled my eyes from a cherry-nippled blonde. "Why would you think that?" I asked. "I've caught plenty of curious peoples digging around here like moles. They think they's gonna find some kinda alien body." "Why would they think that?" I asked dumbly. "A smart boy like you sure to know about a UFO crash over here," Licky said, pulling out 2 dusty bottles from the box. "Why else you be out here nosing round?" "Well, we've heard about it I guess, but I didn't know about alien bodies." "These are good Coca-Colas," he said, popping the caps off the dirty Coke bottles with his teeth and handing one each to Dan and I as he made another 360 around his chops with his tongue. I discreetly knocked a dirt dauber's nest off the side of my bottle and took a drink. Actually, I let the liquid touch my lips, making it appear that I had taken a drink, not letting any of it slip into my mouth. Dan did the same. "How'd oil like Cole Licky's place? You boys got names?" Jim," I said, making one up. Dan delivered one too. "And Horace." Under any other circumstance, I would have busted out laughing. But the unsettling atmosphere suppressed any such reactions. I used to have a granddaddy named Horace. Loved him to death, that old bugger. Silly as a whistle though. Cut his own arm off one night thinking it was Rattler. The old man laughed loudly and moved his arm around like it was a snake. I glanced back at the door. I felt better knowing that we stood closer to the door than Licky. I noticed Dan still staring queasily at the exotic wallpaper with a clash of curiosity and horror, as if he were looking at a car wreck. "Did you see the UFO crash?" I asked, trying to conceal my nervousness. "Well, not exactly. I come here after that." "You're looking for the UFO too?" "No, them rangers hauled that off. I's waiting for something. A horn." With that my heart went flatline. The thing in my pocket was in some way connected to the old man. I began to realize that maybe what Wayne Warren had said about finding some flying saucer parts may have been true. "You ain't happened to see a horn out there, have you?" he said, moving to the wooden crate. "Was it a real UFO from outer space?" Dan finally kicked in. "Yep. From a planet so far away that them stupid scientists ain't seen it yet." "You never answer about that horn," his twang suddenly growing menacing. Our faces began to flush. "You little clever dickens know something, don't ya?" He ran his hand across the crate like he was caressing the skin of a lover. "What horn? Fess up, boy. If you got the horn, yeah, I can't resist it. I knows 'cause I found the other one when I worked for the sheriff's office and we was out here cleaning up after the crash. I found something else too that the rest of them never saw." Fear finally slapped my common sense. I pulled the clear horn thing out of my pocket. "I got this trick or treating," I said as I threw it to the floor behind Licky and bolted for the door. Dan turned to follow, but a deep bark stopped us midway. A large dog stood growling outside. We looked back at Licky, fully expecting him to move and for the kill right then. "Colossus, simmer down," he yelled gruffly. "He's just a tad grumpy, if you know what I mean. You don't gotta be scared of him or roll, Licky. I like you boys," he said, picking up the horn. "What do you want from us?" I demanded. "Now Yunjin, don't get all upset. You brung me this here horn that I've been looking for." "Does that have something to do with the UFO?" I asked, trying to calm down. "Where'd you get it?" "From some guy dressed up like the devil on Halloween." Hey, I knew it," he said with a lick. "I knew it'd find its way back here one way or another. Dressed like the devil. Goddamn." He seemed excited by the fact that Wayne had been dressed like Satan. I wasn't sure what the connection was between him and this old man, or if there even was one, but somehow we had been transporting something very important. "Does that belong to an alien?" Dan asked. "Some folks might call him an alien," he began, "but it really belongs to the devil. I've been keeping his body here since his spacecraft wrecked, waiting for this other horn to turn up. Sometimes it takes the dickens for things to work out. But they always do. Now I can get the rewards I deserve." "The devil?" I asked skeptically. Licky patted the wooden crate. "Yes sir, he's in here." We were speechless. "I bet you boys would like to see him, wouldn't ya?" I shook my head slowly as tears began to well in my eyes. Dan just stood frozen as if he were looking down upon Virgil's 9 rings of hell. "Well, here he is," Licky yelled as he flung open the crate's lid. Its old hinges screeched like a dying animal. Inside lay the body of a creature. It was a brownish red and shriveled like the corpse of a mummy. It had arms and legs and a human-shaped torso, but they were thin and wiry. Its pointed chin and bulbous forehead made it appear like a reddish version of the little gray aliens that people always claim to see. A set of pointed teeth were thrust forward from the retracted lips, opposing the huge sunken sockets in whose valleys rested closed eyes. I could smell the acrid odor of age filling the room, as if the beast were centuries old, having soaked up the stench of death and decay for an eternity. We were repulsed, though neither Dan nor I could take our eyes from the entombed thing. "Just like in the storybooks. Kept he don't come from no hell, he's from up there," Licky said, pointing to the sky. "Been coming here longer and you and I can figure," he exclaimed. "Don't cha like him?" That's when I noticed the horn. The creature had one horn identical to the one I had been given. A jagged hole at the other side of his head made it apparent that he had once possessed two. "At last, I can raise him again. I'll be made a prince of the sky when he sees what old Licky's done for him," the old man said, drooling a line of spit onto the creature's chest as he began to fit the missing horn back in place. The dog outside barked and we remained trapped between two rapidly off-balancing evils. Licky laughed as the component finally clicked into place. A faint whir became audible from the coffin as he pulled back. "Look close boys, you brung back old Nick." The thing began to move, not mechanically like a robot as I would have thought, but more like an organic being that had been sleeping for a long time. It sat upright as the eyes began to open. Their dark lunacy looked like black mirrors as they focused on our white faces. Its skin became more supple and its lips rolled back down over his teeth. The thing smiled a grin that was beyond pure evil, that seemed to crawl through my eyes, down my throat, and squeeze the bloody pulp of my heart like a constrictor. But I resisted and so did Dan. Breaking our gaze, we ran for the door as the beast jumped from the crate. I had been used somehow to bring the horn back to the creature. It seemed to explain my complete lack of good judgment when we followed Licky into the shack. I had been possessed by something much the way Wayne Warren had been, dressing up like the devil, probably unknowingly waiting for some adventurous kid to take the horn from him like the wind carries a seed to its final destination, where it could root and produce seed of its own. "Ain't you a beaut?" Licky cried. The devil responded with a snap of his clawed hand. Blood splattered the nude-papered wall as the old man chortled and fell to the ground, callously beheaded despite his surface. "Shit!" I screamed as Dan and I burst through the door and tripped over the dog. We both hit the ground, along with the dog, in a whirlwind of confusion and gnashing teeth. I felt a few bites hit my arms, but when the devil crashed through the door the dog yelped and darted into the trees. The creature smiled again and looked at us. It was one of those split seconds between reactions when the mind and body are trying to get into sync, when the true perspective of time is lost. For a few endless seconds the foul beast stood above us, and before we could pull ourselves up to run, he turned and headed into the woods. He spun his neck around to look at us one more time as he blended into the countryside and disappeared. Dan and I ran in the opposite direction, back toward our bikes. We said nothing as we careened through the branches and undergrowth gouging at us with fingery thorns as if it were reluctant to let us leave. It wasn't until we had pedaled all the way back to Motor Valley Road that I finally broke the silence and confronted the reality of what had taken place. "Do you think it was the devil?" Dan, terror etched into his face, shook his head. "If it was an alien and there's more of them." He began to cry. I could feel my hands trembling on the handle grips. The reality of aliens and devils, or something that was both, was too much for my young mind. "We can't tell anyone," I said. "I don't ever want to talk about it again." "We won't." "Never," was the last clear word I heard before he fell into a repetitive mumble. If it was the devil, alien or otherwise, and we were responsible for bringing him to life, I grappled with the thought. The thought that has slowly wrested the life from me over the years like a patient serpent subduing its prey. The same thought that was responsible for the phone call I just received. I gently sat the telephone receiver back into the cradle. It had been Dan's sister on the line. He was found dead in his car that morning. He had been missing for weeks. She asked me if I had any idea why he would have driven out to a remote spot in Motor Valley and put a gun to his head. I told her I didn't know. Let's not meet. I think I've met the next Chris Chan. Found in www.reddit.com web link. Narrated by Crimson Red. For those of you who don't get the reference, Chris Chan was pretty popular on the internet a while back. He was known for stalking women in his love quest for a boyfriend-free girl. If you wanna know more, Google search him. I'm sorry this is so long. This is my first post here, ever, but I had to tell this story. Anyway, there's this boy who goes to my college. Dave. Dave is a sophomore. We knew something was up from the time he started at the school last year. People referred to him as the gullible freshman because he'd believe anything you told him. People poked fun at him now and then and he didn't get it. It was a little sad. Easily influenced, he started copying what other people did, and he began to smoke, since that's what his friends in the campus game room did. That's when things started to go sour. He started picking fights with his friends, usually over religion or politics. He blamed them for forcing him to smoke. He started targeting girls in the game room and wouldn't take no for an answer. He was asked to leave and not come back when they were around by the people who usually hung out there. The game room is for relaxing, not for fights and creeping. With nowhere else to go, Dave started wandering in the general vicinity of the campus center. He would usually take to pacing on the lane in front of the campus center, near the library, and in front of the downstairs entrance to the center, both high-traffic areas. As he paced, he would light cigarette after cigarette, staying there for significant blocks of time. And, every time girls passed, he would follow them, shouting after them and trying to get their attention. This is where my friends and I come in. I and my friend, Donnie, are seniors. 4 of my friends, Sophie, Alice, Tom, and Tracy, are juniors. My brother, Patrick, is a sophomore and is Sophie's boyfriend. Tracy is the oldest and is married. It began with her. She didn't know anything about the game room incident, and made the unfortunate mistake of smoking near Dave. She'd make awkward conversation with him every once in a while. It was the kind of obligate conversation you'd have with someone you were standing next to for any period of time, polite, but not overtly friendly. Dave took this as being friendly and, given Tracy's gender, the inevitable happened. He asked her out. "Oh, sorry," Tracy said. "I'm married." Any sane person wouldn't take offense to that, right? Wrong. Dave immediately went, "You're not married. You're just lying to me so you don't have to go out on a date with me." Tracy immediately held up the hand with her wedding ring on it and said, This is my wedding ring. Still think I'm lying?" Dave backed off somewhat. He didn't leave her alone, though. Every time he found Tracy, he'd say, in the same whiny voice each time, "Hey, Tracy, how's your husband?" He has attempted to follow her to her car to meet her husband, has followed her across the campus, has bragged to her about how many guns there are in his house, and has sat down with her during meals without asking. Once, a few of us met for lunch. It was Tracy, Tom, Sophie, Alice, and myself. We ate somewhere different that day. About 15 minutes into lunch, Dave miraculously showed up and helped himself to a seat. No one stopped him out of politeness. We went on with our daily business, eating and talking. I remember that Sophie, Alice, and I were playing Pokemon. Tracy mentioned a news blurb on her phone. I left the table for about a minute to get a drink. When I came back, Dave was standing at the end of the table, shouting about politics. Apparently, Dave is fed by a steady stream of Fox News and didn't appreciate that everyone else at the table was liberal about healthcare, which had absolutely nothing to do with the news Tracy had read off her phone a few minutes prior. He seemed to think that he could change our minds, despite the fact that everyone was arguing with him. I was kind of shocked at what happened in the short span of time I was gone, and went, "What the fuck just happened?" Eventually, I lost my cool, since I know people who are suffering because they can't afford healthcare, despite working very hard. I started arguing, hoping that he'd just leave, but he didn't. "Whatever," I said. "We're not going to agree, so let's stop talking and leave it there." I picked up my DS. "Othio." I asked Alice if she wanted a Cyndaquil. I was breathing then. "Othio, I think we got off on the wrong foot." "Dave, just leave me alone, okay? I need to calm down." Alice wanted the Cyndaquil. "Othio, just listen to me." Both of our heads must have snapped toward him in unison. His mouth was hanging open and he looked pretty distressed. I was glaring. Alice, also glaring, went, "She clearly doesn't want to talk to you right now, but you don't care. You keep trying to rope her into a conversation she doesn't even want to have. Why don't you just leave?" "But. Just. Leave. Go," Alice said, pointing toward the door. He walked about 2 steps before going, "Othio. Leave me alone, Dave." I snapped. "I need to calm down, okay? So leave me alone." "I forgive you," he said. I didn't apologize. I wish this was the end of the story. He continued to accost us, at least once every week. I wasn't around for it sometimes, but sometimes I was. It always started the same way, with, "Hey, Tracy, how's your husband?" Sylvie scared Mr. Conservative Christian off once with a tarot card reading, but it didn't scare him enough, apparently. Which begs the question, if he's so conservative, why'd he want a reading in the first place? Tracy wasn't there one day. It was Sylvie, Donnie, and me. Then I heard it. The voice, with the same tone Tracy must have heard a million times. "Hey, I pretended my phone was vibrating. I picked it up. He left as I spoke to a non-existent Patrick on the other end of the phone. He seemed to walk away a little bit. I hung up. He backtracked to us. "Hi. Can I sit here?" I guess," Sylvie said. Donnie didn't encounter him until this point, so she didn't object, though she seemed a little weirded out. "Who were you talking to?" Dave asked me. "Was that your boyfriend?" Dave didn't know about my boyfriend. Unless he creeped on my Facebook, he was taking a shot in the dark. "No, my brother," I said. Realizing my mistake, I said, "Oh, but, Sylvie, my boyfriend is coming into town this weekend." It was true. "Oh, so, you do have a boyfriend?" he said, clearly annoyed. "Yep. I don't have a girlfriend." "Oh, maybe you'll find one someday." People always tell me that. I'm tired of girls telling me that. It's so stupid. "Well, maybe you will," I said. I didn't get into a relationship until college. "I've never been in a relationship," Dave said. "I think it's really gay at this point." I saw the opportunity and went for it. I pretended to not pay attention. "Oh, sorry, what was that? You're gay now?" "No. I'm straight," he said, getting out of the chair. "I'm straight." "Oh, it's okay," Sylvie said, laughing. "We don't judge. Whatever you're into." "I like girls," Dave shouted, and then he left. I have never seen Donnie more confused in her life. Fast forward to last week. We sat at a different cafe at a table that was out of the way. You'd have to be looking for us to find us. It's Tracy, Patrick, Sylvie, and me. Patrick was doing a drawing for art class. Tracy was studying. Sylvie was watching Patrick draw. I was reading. Dave met us with the usual manner and the usual tone of voice. He said hi to Tracy first, and then hi to me. Patrick went, "Not now, Dave. I'm busy." "So am I," said Tracy. "Sylvie." He went. "Don't bug my girlfriend," Patrick said. He knew where this was going. "Oh. You're dating her?" Dave went. "Yeah," Sylvie said. "Patrick's my boyfriend." "Huh." Dave went, obviously annoyed. He sat near me and asked what I was doing. I had bust out the tarot cards the second I saw him, so I said, "Studying these cards." "What kind of cards?" "They're tarot cards." Dave proceeded to argue with me about tarot cards. He asked me if I'm psychic and immediately said I couldn't be because I didn't know everything about him, like his address. I told him that tarot cards don't work that way. I didn't know shit like his address and that I didn't care to know. It turned into him asking if I knew of any herbs or anything to get him high. I acted all offended and told him to leave. He didn't, saying that he was joking. I said it wasn't funny and that he was distracting people trying to work. Mind you, I'm not easily offended, but acting offended is a good segue into telling someone to gfo. Tracy, seeing what I was trying to do, told him that we were too busy to deal with him today. He went to bug other people in the cafe, but came back 2 minutes later and stood by the table, about 2 feet away. Tracy saw it and went, "Why are you hovering?" "I'm not oot. I just." "Leave, David," she said. He did, but he lingered in the same area for a while, trying to sit with other people and approaching every table with girls at it. Everyone at our table agreed that we needed to stop pussyfooting and making so many excuses. We had to tell him to stop following us and creeping on the girls. Today, Sylvie, Patrick, and I were sitting outside. Patrick saw him first. Sylvie was distracted, standing a few feet from us, talking to her friend, Jaya. She was the closest to Dave, so, when she saw him, she power-walked toward us. "Oh, look at the time," I said. "Got to go to that final." I grabbed my stuff, ready to book it. Dave came over. Well, what's going on over here?" "Nothing. We're leaving. We have to go to a final." He followed me, ditching Sylvie and Patrick, as I turned the corner. "Oh, good luck." I nodded. He still followed. I walked faster. What kind of final? That was it. No more nice off feel. Oh you. Piss off, Dave. What? I said. Piss off. Why? Because of this. You keep following us everywhere. Stop it. Why are you so obsessed? You know what, Althea? You're just like the other girls. No, I'm like all the other people on this campus. I walked away, catching up with Patrick and Sylvie inside of the campus center. We went up to the 3rd floor, where we saw a pacing Dave in front of the campus center and the library. He was ranting to a guy who was smoking there. There were 2 girls studying near us, so I felt it was only right to warn them. They knew who he was. "Oh, David," one of them said. "Yeah, he cornered us once." They also told me about one time when they were at lunch. One girl got up to use the bathroom and he helped himself to her seat without asking before attempting to hit on the other girls at the table. He was trying to figure out if they had boyfriends or not, apparently. Not like it matters, he'll stalk you no matter what. About 20 minutes later, they came up to me again. They'd been looking out the window the whole time and said, "The eagle has flown." He followed 2 girls down the lane. Sorry this was horrendously long, but I had to tell you guys the story about Pacing Dave. I Found You. Made by Winter. Found in www.creepypasta.org web link. My eyes struggle to open. I blink several times, trying to take in my surroundings. A star-white ceiling looms above me. Even from a distance, I can make out the little cracks that scour the surface, hundreds of tiny passages into darkness. Shifting around a bit, I feel the starchy sheets beneath my outstretched hands. They feel stale and unwashed. Unsurprisingly, the rigid mattress beneath me is no more comforting. I slowly lean up and glance around the room. It's dimly lit, a single desk lamp rests on a table in the far corner. A few books are strewn across the table's surface, none of which are recognizable from where I'm sitting. The table looks worn down, as if it's been there for decades. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice the wall next to me. It's covered in black etches and scribbles. My eyes wander across the remaining walls, but I soon look away. The same markings enshroud the entire room. I begin to sift through my memories, trying to remember what could possibly bring me to such a place. But, to my horror, I can recall nothing. Scarce images float to the surface, yet nothing concrete enough to be considered sensible. My heart begins racing. My temples throb as I clench my palms to the side of my head. Where am I? More importantly, who am I? Deciding I need to do something, I slide myself off the bed, feeling my body creak from the sudden movement. As my bare feet hit the ground, a shiver shoots up my spine. It's freezing. I feel uneasy. Something doesn't feel right. I creep towards the table, unable to shake the dread that suddenly washed over me. I look at the 3 books on the table, searching for something that might be helpful, but the covers are so worn the books are unrecognizable. Just then, I notice a folder underneath one of the books. I hastily slide the book onto the floor and grasp the folder. My eyes bulge. Written in fresh blood are the words "Open Me" followed by a crudely drawn exclamation point. It's odd, but I can't help sharing the writer's excitement. My hands tremble as I open the folder. Inside is a thick stack of papers, wrinkled from time. As I begin to rifle through the pages, I find its compilation of files on someone under the alias of Patient 37. I continue to read through the entries. Aggressive, highly intelligent, violent, murderous, masochist. I cringe. To my horror, the entries go on and on, countless recollections of unprecedented brutality and terror. Pictures of mutilated bodies plague the folder. It's almost as if I can feel the blood of the victims seeping through the pages. After what feels like hours, I get to the last page. On it is a picture of man, if you can call him that, in his late 30s. The eyes are sunken and dark, with shadows engulfing them. The nose is jagged, clearly broken earlier in life. A twisted grin covers the bottom half of the face. The hair, to my surprise, is neatly combed to the left, a stark contrast to the rest of the image. As I continue to look at the portrait, I can't help but shudder. There is something almost inhuman about the man. My eyes wander and I notice the dark red at the bottom of the page, another note, but this time it exclaims, "Come find me." I drop the folder and stumble backward. I suddenly feel nauseous as I'm hit by a crushing wave of fear. This man, this murderer, wants me to come find him? Thoughts start swirling in my head. I drop to one knee, confusion overwhelms me. Why would I seek him out, this patient 37? What does he want with me? Claustrophobia kicks in. I look to the door beyond the bed. Gritting my teeth, I stand up and trudge towards the closed door. My hand tightly squeezes the door handle. I stand there panting for a bit, sweat drips down my forehead. There is no way of knowing what's on the other side. I close my eyes and turn the handle. It opens. I'm met by a narrow corridor. The lights above flicker, giving off just enough light to see. There is an intercom on the far side of the wall. The right line below the speaker blinks rapidly. Just then, music begins to play throughout the entire hallway. The soft keys of a piano. Simple, but beautiful. I recognize it, Fors Nocturne No. 1 in E-flat minor, Opus 33 No. 1. I put my hands to my head. Why do I know this song? Why is it playing in such a wretched place? Continuing to struggle with my thoughts, I walk through the corridor, feeling strangely guided by the melody. The hallway is barren, just like the prior room. No sound can be heard except for the rhythmic fingering of the piano keys. Oddly, there are no windows, just white walls. I walk over to one of the walls and brush my hand up against it as I walk. The pattern gives off a soothing sensation on my palm. I close my eyes and continue to walk. My eyes jolt open as the pattern on the wall changes. The silence is broken as my hand slides through something wet. I quickly pull my hand back and stare it in the quivering light. It's covered in blood. I let out a shrill as my eyes dart towards the wall. Drawn on the surface is a thick red arrow, pointing in the direction I'm walking. I look onward. A body lies on the ground. I rush over, but immediately notice there's no hope. The man's eyes are gouged out and a knife protrudes from his stomach. Without thinking, I grab the knife's handle and pull. Blood erupts from the wound and spatters on my face. I cry out and I frantically wipe it from my eyes. This is disgusting. This can't be happening. Where the fuck am I? I need to get out of here. Clenching the knife, I move forward. I pass a large front desk on my right. An elderly woman lies face down, a pair of scissors impaled in the back of her head. Blood pools around her face. A security monitor is on the wall behind her. Nothing but static. I grit my teeth and look down. I need to keep moving. As I reach the end of the long hallway, I see another arrow, this time pointed to right. Written above it reads a message, "Almost there." What kind of sick fucking game was this? Who would do something like this? Yet, I can't help but follow the direction. I'm nothing but a man lost in a strange world. I turn to the right, and see a green light coming from an opening at the end of the hallway. I approach carefully, being lured like an animal into a cage. Once I'm close, I notice it's an entrance to a bathroom. I can make out shapes on the ground, but I'm too far away to see what they are. I shudder. Based on past experiences, I know it's not going to be pleasant. In the doorway now, my eyes scan the room. Bodies, at least 5, cover the floor. The entire surface is covered in red. I can barely make out a clean spot on the once white floor. It's grotesque, yet I can't help but move forward. The melody continues to propel me into the unknown. The bathroom lights flicker while I navigate around the bodies. Looking around, the room is a pit of despair. Blood is spattered across the walls, the once pristine tiles now unrecognizable. Strands of meat hang from the stall openings. Dark liquid curdles on the floor beneath them. This can't be real. Can it? Just then, I notice a message on the mirror. I can't make it out from my angle, so I step closer. My heart is racing out of my chest. Thump. 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 The adrenaline surges through every ounce of my body. I inch closer and closer, trembling more with each step. Once I'm directly in front of the mirror, I stop. I can make out the letters. I read the message on top of the mirror. My heart slows. My breathing calms. I stare into the mirror and slowly exhale. Written above my head are 3 simple words. Hello, patient 37. Everything stops. Silence. A twisted smile creeps across my face. A whisper escapes from my mouth. I found you. If you guys wonder where I find these creepypasta stories, the link is in the description below. If you enjoy the video, please leave a like and subscribe. And as well share this video to your friends. Thank you.